And I should, if I was nice, I should make the guy who made this trick do it, but I won't. So the best blog of this year from Seth and Mike was actually Steve, not even us. So Steve made this this great tutorial up. So this is a really cool trick. There's actually 2 tricks in here that I really want to highlight that Steve just did an amazing job on blogging about. So well thought out. And this is kind of just a really good UI enhancement. So as report developers, we do a lot of like putting data in front of people, but we also do a lot of UI UX design in front of them as well, because they have to like what it looks like. And then they also have to be able to enjoy like the experience of what they're clicking on, right? I have to understand what is making sense. So what this demo shows is I have a chart here with selected measures, essentially. I have 3 different measures, and if I click a different button, it changes the data, highlights the button, and shows me the new measure on the table. So this works really well, especially when you look at, so I've been doing a lot of Excel conversions recently. And when you do Excel conversions, you have this massive table. There's a bunch of dimensions, and typically things are sliced by like a customer or over time, or I'm looking at sales, or I'm looking at dollars, right? There's like specific things I'm trying to calculate. And when you're switching between measures, it becomes a pain in Power BI to just automatically switch between different types of calculations, right? I'm looking at time, a time-based series, but I'm looking at by how many units did I sell? How many dollars did I sell? I want to see specific aspects of my data, different KPIs. This way helps me minimize that landscape space, so I don't have to have this massive Excel document with tons of charts across the screen. I can focus you on one chart, get you thinking about just units, and then we can move on to like what's dollars or revenue or other things doing as well. So it's really about what we want to show. So if I click on margin then here again, it changes the chart again and then highlights margin and then selects it. So we're going to walk through how to build this, and Steve will keep me honest to make sure I get all the steps right. Okay, so we're starting off with a bar chart here like this. So this is a simple bar chart, and I'll actually, you know what? I will. Let me do a quick. Let me delete it. We're gonna go fresh. So let's just start off with just a single piece of data point. I'm gonna grab ID and dollars, and we're gonna make that a bar chart. So this is what we're starting with, basically this. So we start here, we know we want to be able to change between dollars and other things, so we have to start building some structure in our data model to support that changing ability. So one of the things that we do here is we build a table called control. So I'm going to build a new table, basically from scratch, but I'll just show you the principle of what we're doing. Home, we enter data on the ribbon. This will bring up a column here. And we'll need something like with an ID in it. So we'll have an ID column, and then we'll have like a name column. And I didn't want to do that by hitting tab, so I will remove that one. So we'll have IDs 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to have dollars, margin, and volume. Those will be our, well, you know what, you probably do dollars and volume before margin. So let's just do volume in order here. Dollars, volume, and then we'll do margin at the bottom here. Delete this other column, and that's our table. So this will be basically our selection table. These are the list of measures that we're going to use in our calculations to help us do things. So we're here going to go, we'll call this, I had the other one labeled as control, so I'll do control 2 on this one, and we'll load the data. This will then produce a table on the right-hand side. So this is a disassociated table. If we look in the data model here, assuming that it's not automatically linked, it'll just sit out here in no man's land. It'll have an ID and a name. There won't be any relationships back to anything else in the data model. It's a standalone table. Go back to the data model. We're now going to build a measure. So what we want to do is I want to select something here, right? So if I come over to this table, I want to build a calculation. Actually, let me start with this. I don't want to go too far. I will drop in a slicer on the page, and you'll see why we're doing this here in a second. And I will add the number ID, the numerical ID, to this list. And we'll change this so it's a list and a drop-down. So now I get 1, 2, and 3. So basically, if I select these items, I'm able to pick the number of whatever's in my table. So now what we're going to do is we're going to now build a measure inside our sales table that'll help us detect what we've selected and then automatically pick something. So we'll go over here to sales, we'll say new measure, and then I'll call this selection control 2. then this is where we will enter into the switch statement. Now this menu bar is awesome, so we'll try and do this way. So what the switch expression it does is it requires you to have something, an expression to enter in the information, and then based on what's entered, it then picks the scenario that meets your data set. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the function called selected value, where we can then, what this does is basically if has one selected, show me the value. If has multiple selected, show me a different value. So that's what it's doing behind the scenes. This is like syntax sugar for if has one if you were writing DAX long ago. So what this essentially does is it will let you put in a property. So we're going to select our control to table, and we're going to bring in the ID level. So basically, when I select something from that table, show me what value that is, and then the alternative result is what is the default value that I want you to display, right? So if I have multiple things selected, I could say blank, or I could force a value of some nature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force this control to always be 1. So by default, if you select nothing, it will always select the volume in our list. So I'm going to set 1 here, and that will be my default value when I'm using this function. So I'll close that bracket off. That's my initial expression. Now we're going to build other parts of this. So let's build our value 1. So now we're building the case switching statement that says what happens when values show up in this field. So when the 1 shows up, we want to do sum of. Does anybody remember what was in my table? What was the order? Something volume margin.
Dollars volume margin.
He's taking notes. This is great. Okay, so we'll do sales dollars first. So when we do the 1, we're going to say first do the sum of sales. Then we're going to go again for another line. So when it's a 2, now we will use the sum. How am I doing, Steve? Am I getting close here?
You're doing well.
Okay, good. We'll do sales again, and so this one would be volume now. So we'll do volume the second time through. And then lastly, we'll do our third one. So this is option number 3. And then we'll do sum again. And now this will be volume margin at the end here. And then I think I can close her off. Actually, I think there's an else in here too. Did you keep an else? I don't think you did one. We'll do an else anyways. We'll just do some for kicks and giggles. The switch statement actually has a default mechanism. If something falls out of parameter, if it's something that it can't find in that switch statement, you can say for all other conditions, throw this value. So what we're going to do is we're going to protect the measure. So that way, if you added extra measures and you did screw it up for some reason, and you put a 9 in there, for whatever reason, you updated a table and you forgot to update the measure, it will automatically default back to what it knows how to do. So it'll automatically default to volume. So I'm going to do a sum of sales volume here. An old item, close that off, close off my switch statement. I wrote some DAX. It worked first time. We'll see if it really works. All right, so now that we have our selection control, I'm going to put this on the page so you can see what it's doing. Not like that. Let's go after a card here. All right, so this is doing the sum of these different items. So if I select different items here, it's actually, you see it's adjusting those numbers based on my criteria. And because I'm lazy here, I will also do this so I can see what it, so there's 1, there's my volume. Actually, let's do this. One last item here. Don't count it. Just give it to me in order. So I don't want to get myself mixed up on these lists anymore. There we go. All right, so that works there. Now what we can do is, because the selection control is actually doing the sum of the calculation, we can actually dump that now on our chart. So we're going to take that new formula and we're going to plop it on our chart here for selection control. So instead of using dollars now, we're going to get rid of that, and now we're going to use our new control. So now by selecting 1, it's not going to say, hey, we're looking at volume as a measure, put that measure on the chart. 2 and then 3. So now I have a dynamic measure on top of that table. All right. The next thing we need to do is now we need to make the button controls. So this is the genius of this whole tutorial, which I think is just so brilliant. Kudos, Steve. So what you can do here now is we can go to Insert. We can now add a button. I'm going to add just a generic blank button on the page. So the button's here. Make it a little bit larger here. And now we're going to have our 3 different measures that we want you to select. Button text, we'll turn that on. We'll do this one for volume. And let's make it a bit larger, more volume, turn it up to 11. Insert reference here. Sorry, couldn't resist. So we have volume here, and then what we're going to do now is we're going to add some controls to this. And let me actually, I'll copy it one over once more, like this one. Well, there's no lines, snappy lines. I'll leave it there. And then for this volume, I will actually add. We'll change the name again. So this one will be for our sales, or dollars actually. We'll do dollars. Okay. Boom. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go now do some conditional formatting on these. So we'll go to the volume item, we'll go to the background, and okay, this is really bad. You'll notice, control 1, control 1. When I put my cursor over near color, there is no little dots in this section. So beware, when you put your cursor over here, now you get an ellipsis. Why they hide this, I have no freaking clue. Now there's an ellipsis in the corner. So putting your cursor there is the custom formatting functions that let me adjust the properties of this. So just be aware, there's lots of properties that do this. You kind of have to just know about it at this point. You have to hover over stuff until hopefully things show up and you get some ellipsis to show up. I'm guessing it's a bug. Microsoft, if you can fix this, this would be great. Since deployment? Since deployment, I guess. But it seems like a bug. But if you hover over that, I can now adjust the conditional formatting of this field. So now we're going to go conditional format. I am now going to say I'm going to do a rule around this formatting. And now you'll know why I use why Steve used numbers. Sorry, why he's using numbers in this demo, because this is how we're going to control the background color. We're going to go over here to our new sales table. I'm going to use our selection control number 2 because that's what we're using. And then what I'm going to say the value is, and then it gives me a number. So when the value is 1, change the color to this light gray. So this is my highlighting color for that visual. So I say OK here, and so now, hopefully. Oh, did I do it in the wrong column?
You did it on the measure.
Let's not do that. Let's do it on the ID column. Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry. Quick redo. This is why I got the expert here helping me along. Let's go conditional formatting, rules, control 2, ID. That's what I'm looking for. Sum. Sorry. Good call. So wrong table I picked. So I'm picking the sum ID of the control table that we're using. So it's going to say when this value is this number, then do this to the background. Now hitting OK. Now it says, OK, you've selected one value because I'm filtering the table. So this filter is changing the state of that table in the filter context. That filter context is then being picked up by the conditional formatting of the button. And now when I switch away to number 2, it says that conditional formatting is no longer apparent. I can now switch the color background to something else. So when I switch back, I'm highlighting volume. And so now this is a UI control on top of that button. We repeat the same thing for dollars. Click the ellipsis again, conditional formatting. Go here, rules. We pick control 2, the ID. Let's say the sum. Value is now 2, because now we're looking at the second measure. And for kicks and giggles, we'll just use a different color in the background so you can see that it is doing something. We'll use light yellow and set OK. And now when I switch it, you can see the buttons are changing colors between the different things, which is kind of cool. All right. Now we need to hook up the controls between the buttons and then what you're selecting. So like when I click the action of the button, I need something to do something that will change the data of the page. So this is where we use bookmarks. So I'm going to highlight item number 1 here. So that means I've selected the dollars amount. I'm going to go on the home ribbon. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to go to the view ribbon. I'm going to turn on the bookmark panel. And then this is where I can make a new bookmark. So I'm going to highlight the visual that is the slicer. And I'm going to snap the bookmark. Now this is important. Bookmarks are complicated. There's a lot of features you can do inside them. We're going to use a feature, and Steve will attest to this, and I may have you jump in here a little bit. When you're using bookmarks, you will almost always use the selected visuals as your bookmarks. From ones who have built large games, and there's lots of buttons and options you can do in bookmarks that I've seen, there's a lot of challenges that you can do if you just say, leave it open and say, select, filter everything. You really want to like narrow down what your context is for the bookmark, because it makes it much easier to build reports or UI functionality inside them. So I'll show you how to do that now. I'm going to highlight the slicer, click add. There's my bookmark, and I'm going to say this is going to be for volume 2. And then I'm going to click the ellipsis here, and so now I have some options, but I want to turn off the display. That means don't turn visuals on and off. I don't want to do that. Then current page is a navigation element, meaning if I click this bookmark, it will take me to this page. I don't want this bookmark to navigate me. I almost always turn this one off as well. I always turn off current page because I just want it to do an action. And if it does an action on a different page, I really don't care. So I'm going to turn that one off as well. And then the final option here is not all visuals, only my selected visual, because I only want it filtering the slicer. And the important thing here was you have to click the slicer first and then snap the bookmark. If you click something else and then try to update the bookmark, then by rehighlight, it doesn't seem to quite work right. So I highly just delete the bookmark and start over. It's much easier. You'll save yourself a bunch of headache. So let's build another bookmark here again. I'm going to highlight number 2 item. So this is our second selection. We're going to then snap another bookmark, and this will be my dollars now. $2. We're going to turn off the display. We're going to turn off the current page, and we're going to switch it to selected visuals. So now, if I click on the bookmarks, it should switch between my 2 different items. So now that I have bookmarks, now I can wire up the actions. Clicking on volume, I go back over to the action area, turn it back on. Let's make it do a bookmark. The bookmark will be volume for this button. Click on dollars, turn on the action, make it action, bookmark, and then $2. So now when I control click on these buttons, it should automatically select those different items. Now, one of the things is yucky about this page is we have the slicer still on the page. We need to get rid of it because we don't need it anymore. It's purely a control mechanism that's behind the scenes. So I'll take this one. I'm going to open up the selection panel now and then hide it. And then hide it. Okay, now that it's hidden, because we turned off those bookmarks to not hide or show visuals, that bookmark should, that slicer visual should always stay hidden now. Even though we switch bookmarks, it should not toggle it back on to be visual. So now when I click the buttons, dollars, volume, you can see it's still adjusting everything. It's still changing the action of the slicer, and it's still picking up that context of the slicer for the rest of the page, which is pretty stinking sweet. Anyways, that was the best tutorial from 2019. And you got it live. Yeah. All right, so please hold your applause.
What's the advantage